ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the City of Nacogdoches Development Corporation. Today is May the 7th, 2026. The time is 5:20 p.m. We'll go ahead and, if we'll rise and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Face the flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
All right. We'll start with the regular agenda. The first item up, 3A, is consider approval of the minutes from the City of Nacogdoches Development Corporation regular meeting held on April the 2nd, 2026. We have a motion?
Also move.
Move. We have a second? Bill. Okay. All in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. We'll move to 3B, which is receive an update on the filing of the application for tax exempt status for the City of Nacogdoches Development Corporation.
Mr. President, members of the board, Jerry Baker, City Attorney. Just wanted to give you a brief update on where we are on our tax exempt status as far as the entity is concerned. As you recall, the board has charged me with going out and trying to finalizing everything with regards to our Type B, and I have good news that we've got our final piece of the puzzle done. So the federal government has now recognized our tax exempt status. We've got the letter right here, and so there's no filing requirements in the future. We just need to maintain this letter, and anybody who wants to donate to the corporation can receive a copy of that letter for their tax purposes. So the final step's done. We've checked all those boxes. So no more steps we have to do as far as the government's concerned.
We can start operating now.
Now you can start.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for that report.
Mm-hmm.
We've been waiting for that. Any questions for Jerry?
Sorry.
Do we have any money in that account yet?
None.
That'll be our
That's
next
one
steps.
of the discussion items that's coming up next, I believe. So.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you.
Mhm.
We'll move on to 3C, discussion regarding potential projects for future public hearing and funding considerations.
I don't even come up here when I'm at a council meeting, and as a
I've
voting
noticed
member,
that.
I'm going to go ahead and do this just to change things up.
I noticed that.
I'm wearing
We're
an SFA.
impressed.
Yeah, I'm wearing an SFA pullover, and I didn't go there. So
I say that.
there you go. You never know what you're going to get. So, to your point, Bill, is there money? What would you do with it? Now, I would definitely take the tact as we have to with our general fund budget, is that we study situations, evaluate what we're going to spend on and what the ROI is and what the purpose is. Now, the existing code for Type B effectively requires that once the money is in there, we then have to go through a public hearing process to identify the projects. So what we have done, one, and I don't know, I think the PowerPoint that Mary Frances probably has is probably put together above and beyond what I've got just on paper right now. And if it isn't, she'll correct me. But really the responsibilities, I think we need to think of the Type B. It's the hand up, not the hand out. We need to think about really spurring development or economic development, meaning primary jobs, commerce, revitalization, those type of things, but not a long-term support system for any type of businesses. And I would say that also when we get in, even on the housing side, there's some things we can do, but covering, and I hate to use this term, covering the business side risk or rate of return should not be how we approach projects. What we and even that even includes when there are downturns. There are certain market sectors that are, in a good time, a non-war time, are always going to say, let me have more. One would be residential. And you can, even in boom towns, they will always look for a way to cut corners. So, but what we can do is identify some of the items that it's a bird in the hand if certain folks come here and develop and follow the code. So let me kind of just run through these bullets. So just general responsibilities, again, with the focus and the charter, and I think the charge, and Randy would probably be able to chime in on this, when City Council and Chad as well, when City Council said, okay, let's move forward on Type B. We're at a strategic, and remember this, a strategic disadvantage to our peers because, one, we don't have that Economic Development Corporation that is, one, funded. Now, we do have seed money. It's about $1 million once the transfer would be finalized that Jerry has grown much older at working on in terms of the timeline, because in part because of the government shutdown, to get all of the paperwork aligned. Once that transfer occurs, I think my recommendation, at least to the rest of y'all, would be, and I've worked in 2 cities that had Type B Corps, and then I've worked in 2 that didn't, and including ones that were fairly large. And those were at a disadvantage to their peers, their surrounding peers. And one of them is just under 100,000 population, the other one is over. So that should give you an idea. Let's use the one that was over. They were at a disadvantage to cities that had, say, 10,000, 15,000 of nighttime population, but had 120,000 daytime population because of office and retail. And so when they're pulling in more sales tax, and thus that much more sales tax into their Type B corporation, you can just imagine what that can do in terms of a multiplier effect. So since we don't have a lot to start with, I think we look at really the low-hanging fruit. I know there will also be some potential projects down the road that could come up. It might be something we can't, we prefer not to have hit the general fund directly. It might be a $50,000 or $100,000 infrastructure piece that doesn't hit one of the utility funds. It might be, let's say, a driveway connection. It might be a traffic signal. It might be a traffic signal that if you install it, you get a major taxpayer that comes in at a hard corner. Let me just throw that out. Not that we need more traffic signals on North, but I'm just giving you an example. Or striping. So, supply and demand. I think one thing, even with the larger economic issues right now, be they fuel prices, interest rates, probably going back up, supply chain, we do have the luxury of SFA now being part of the UT system, and that tied to the permanent university fund, and that tied back to oil revenues with the state. So that fund is probably not going down. There's a lot of things that are probably going down right now, but that's not going to be one of them. So that demand, driven by their increased student population, is going to translate where we had a flat line for a long time into data that site selectors are already starting to see in some regards, but in other areas they're probably not, in part because our historic flat line lack of population growth. So if you were looking at not just your every 10-year census data, but your annual American Community Survey data, you're going to not see the demand. It's going to be lagging in terms of what's really there. So even some of our retailers are going to see our data and they'll say, wait a minute, they look like they've been 34,000 for how long, and they were actually shrinking in population. However, we all know that those that get here on the ground floor that are already looking hard at SFA's master plan they're going to be the ones to make the most money. So we want to help tell that story to get more to come here, ideally without incentives. Oh, even better. So let's see. I say that.
Well, no, there's the housing gap would be
Well, and then,
Yeah.
that does tie back to the housing gap analysis. So one of the projects that I know we've talked about it at council would really be to identify not only the housing types that we have an issue with in terms of lack of supply, but also digging deeper, the age of the housing stock, the style of the housing stock, the proximity of that housing stock to, let's say, employment centers, the university, what kind of major thoroughfare is it on or is it not on? Do we have some potential housing platted tracks that are sitting out there that might also have a big gap in terms of when they'll occur because of the lack of infrastructure connection? So it might not mean that we can subsidize that. However, it might mean if they look at our larger demand, going back to the second bullet, if we shop that or push that information out with a good overall report, we might be able to find an end user that can develop that and take that on. And you're talking about, we want to get this in front of folks from Houston and Austin and Dallas, not the ones that want to come here and create a TERS or a PID or a MUD or want us to subsidize it out of the general fund. And so for those watching, let them be warned, because we will be watching, because bottom line is, yes, we only collect half. I'm not going to get into that issue.
Yeah.
We only collect half the sales tax we should.
Yeah.
So beggars can't be choosers, but we can certainly tell a good story. So, and then the airport business plan. The reason I want to get into that, and I'm going to jump into that pretty quickly. It's already our most subsidized business unit. It doesn't make us money, it loses us money. The other piece is, and we can call it a loss leader. It's great to have it. It's great to have that business connection and that component. It also is necessary to further develop it for physical connectivity, probably long term, for passenger service. It might not be the same thing that flies out of Longview or flies out of Tyler, but that connectivity, it might be single engine, 10 seat. That should at least probably be the goal. Now, in terms of what we spend on next at the airport to facilitate long term, even with support of, let's say, foundations or private sector development, we do need to be careful, because if that ratio, which it probably is going to continue to go up, not down, at least in the near term, if we add the next phase of something and it drives that cost up further, it may well get beyond what the feds really and the FAA really intend in terms of it. It's supposed to be self-supportive. So by comparison, this is just a snapshot of this year. The general fund is, whoa, we can go back to the last one.
Oh, okay.
The general fund
That's why you got to print it.
is is running at the lowest. We're under in terms of expenditures versus revenues. Both the utility fund, sanitation fund, so that's the landfill, they're running almost spot on. The airport, however, is running off, and it's going to run further because we're going to have the interruption of the runway resurfacing. So we're not going to be selling fuel. And so it's one of those things. Let me just say this. When we talk about golf, we talk about Gulfstreams. Unless we capture their credit cards, it doesn't do us any good. And I don't know how else to say that. Unless we have a vehicle, meaning higher fuel prices, maybe a very expensive, and I don't mean cost on us, but let's say we have a nice FBO building and a restaurant. Well, they need to be selling probably that, not the $5 hamburger, but maybe the $18 hamburger. These are the type of things. Unless you can capture it, it would be one of those things that, from a business perspective, if you had all these silos, that would be one that you would be looking at selling, unless you can figure out how to turn it into revenue. Would I put you on the spot, or you on the spot with that? If you had a business unit that was double in cost and your others are running right where they're supposed to, so hence that leads us to probably the first ask would be to spend on an airport business plan out of that million. Probably we're going to estimate in the $100,000, $125,000 magnitude. Although what we would issue an RFQ, we'd ask for proposals. Part of that would also be to look at some of the specifics, meaning if you do or when we would do the additional parking apron, or if we did a tower. the operating implications for a tower. Is it a contract tower? Is it a manned tower? What is the likelihood and the time frame that we'd get that done, and what that cost impact would be until we have the volume for the feds to at least consider subsidizing it. So all of those will be decision points that, even though this body can participate in, at the end of the day, that's probably going to be because we don't have, a dedicated sales tax revenue for this entity. At the end of the day, some of those decisions are going to go back to y'all on council. And when you're making $1 million decisions on capital, and they're competing against things like, I know we need a couple new fire trucks, big ones, $1 million ones right now. We have a plan on the garage, but I can name several other projects that will touch more people in terms of population, and we have to keep that in mind. We're looking at the overall ROI, what it means for our citizens, what it means for our residents, what it means for visitors, all of the above. And at the end of the day, the goal would be make the airport the best airport it can be for the size city we are and what SFA is going to grow to, and to get that 1.37, which will probably very soon rise to 1.5 or more, down to 1.0, where it's self-supporting. So that's kind of framing the issue. And then you can go to the thing I'll need to wear my cheaters for.
That's why I have a big copy of it. He has one.
I've got one here.
Got a question on, is there any way that we might possibly get the UT system to help with that airport, since we have that flight program? And
Well, I'll just say this publicly. I've said it to others. When Sharp was the chancellor at A&M System, I forgot how many years in, they went ahead and took the airport off the hands of College Station. If you want a certain outcome and you want it now, they have the means. Would they partner with us on something they don't own? Historically, that's usually not the case. However, public-private partnerships, I can tell you this, I think UT's done less of it, but A&M has done more of it in the realm of student housing, where they'll actually partner. They'll go in together with a developer, which also might be kind of where I'm going to lead also with some of the discussions on some of the housing gaps. There may not be another way to do it, at least as it goes towards SFA, not just student off campus, but possibly even on the professor side. Even if it's something that they ultimately sell and divest themselves out of, in the kind of market we're in, if they want a certain type of product closer to town, closer to the university, they might need to help us aggregate land, or they aggregate land and help partner with the developer to build it and help finance it and sell those things off to their professors. They do all kinds of things in university towns up on the East Coast, all kinds of arrangements that you'd probably be surprised. They were doing it because land's expensive, development's expensive. It's now hit everywhere else. It's now hit Texas. It's not, as y'all know now, y'all have probably looked at the cost of construction now. It's not what it was 15 or 20 years ago.
how would we pursue that?
I think what we would do, we would take our ALP, we'd put together this business plan, and we would have a very frank conversation with administration here, and if it made sense, if they wanted us to have a further discussion, or they would like to have a discussion with the regents, we'd be able to lay out, if we stay on our critical pathway with what money we have or don't have, this is how long it's going to take for us to get to where you would like it to be. However, if you either partner with us or take it, you can move it up. But we have a finite amount of money to play with. And if it's $1 million, now granted, we have bond funds, but if you look at, let's just take the manned tower, that would probably be mean, that could probably eat up almost all the bond funds, just theoretically, that we already have. Then that's hitting your general fund ad valorem tax rate. And again, that's for something that doesn't really touch everybody in Nacogdoches the same way, let's say, sewer does. I hate to use that example. So I think we would be like anything else. If you're going to sell something, I think you need to have as much data that you could provide them and say, so they would know what they'd be either partnering in or buying. Would we have without additional sales tax coming this way, even if it was just a quarter of the penny that we're not collecting? If we had that coming in, could we speed things up a little bit more on the airport or in other areas? Yes, but you would also have to then at that point look again at the ROI. It becomes an opportunity cost discussion at some point. Even if you had let's say you had $2.5 million coming into this entity per year, are you gonna focus that on primary jobs? Are you gonna say, okay, this is gonna bring commerce and this is gonna bring visitors and it has an economic impact, but some of it's not direct. And then by that time, we'd also probably be able to do some analysis on how much fuel we're selling to those going to the golf course, and are they coming to town? Are they spending money? We'd have to do surveys, and you have to have enough time to be able to pull that data. Otherwise, you don't really have anything to go by. But it is something that we could use that business plan for, at least start moving the bar to have that discussion.
I think you'd get a warm reception from the administration working with this.
Especially if they know where our gaps are. I mean, if we can't tell them, then and then also where our weaknesses are. I do think that this will help expose where we can either manage it differently, which is pretty much bare bones right now. I do think for us to go up to that next level, we're probably going to spend more money in the near term, not less, which is going to be a further cost pressure. So we're going to have to look at the phasing of a few things in here that will hopefully offset that over time so it amortizes.
Let me ask a question. You have your ground leases, then you have investment in hangars and things like that, which are ad valorem. What is the taxes? What's the value of those investments out there, and what's the tax revenue the city gets from those investments out at the airport?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I will say this, and this just came today from the tax office. So as you know, the legislature just in the last session on the business personal property exemption, that came down, right? It's going to affect us to the tune of $50 million of valuation, the wrong direction.
Well,
So there may be some of that is now not going to be on the tax rolls. Some equipment at the airport.
I guess my question is, you have in property investments at the airport that the city's getting tax from those investments, and that is going to the general fund. And so my point is, if that gets away from the city, if it now that tax that you're generating from airport investments going to the general fund, and then you're subsidizing the airport, if you didn't have those, it wouldn't go to the general fund. So when you look at this number and say we're actually upside down, those investments in that airport are for that airport that are going to the city. You're not pulling them out and saying, wait a minute, if we didn't have those investments there, the city wouldn't have that income. It wouldn't be a part of your general fund. So the fact that you're subsidizing it, to me, you're getting the money for the airport as though the airport's producing that for you.
Well, I don't think we're actually, and this is prior to this change in the state law. I don't think we were actually collecting as much as you would think. I don't have that.
Whatever that number is, whatever it is, it's going to the general fund, but it's actually being supported. So if you really had more investment, people coming and building on that facility, other than sales tax that you would get from the purchase of whatever materials, that increase in property value would go to the general fund, and it wouldn't look like the airport's actually supporting itself when in fact it is. Could we
I
at
mean,
least look at that
if we
number?
had for example, if we had a Bell helicopter wanted to open it, something like that there, or a Lockheed needed to do something, come up from the south, and you had primary jobs and some very expensive manufacturing equipment there, yes. I mean, and that would be the type of things we would want to look at in the business plan. How can we fill that gap?
But we've got those numbers. I don't remember.
I don't remember them off the
It
top
would,
of my
it would
head.
be interesting to know that, because you are supplementing subsidizing from the general fund.
Yes.
But you're getting income from the investments, and when people build a hangar out there,
Right.
whatever that increase in property value is in the city's portion, the city's getting it, but it looks like it's going to the general fund.
Yeah.
And that's the only enterprise fund that I see that's a little different than others, because you're having investments in the airport that's helping the city,
Yeah.
if you do.
Yeah, Mike has
And
those
maybe-
numbers, because when we looked at it with negotiating with Shannon on his deal out there.
It-
you
but
remember-
but it wasn't as much as you would think.
No,
Yeah,
it's
and
not.
It's not
and
a-
it's, and
it's-
it's probably not. I'm just saying that should be part, because let's say somebody comes out there and says, we're gonna build a huge hangar, we're gonna put $10 million out there. Well, that should equate, unless you give some type of abatement or something there, it should equate to money to the general fund. But it wouldn't show up in this calculation, because that revenue to the city is for an investment at the airport that you wouldn't get otherwise. You're not gonna get a $5 million or $10 million hangar in town, just, you're having it because of the airport itself.
And I looked at that, what the tax revenue was compared
Yeah,
to
ad
our
valorem,
loss,
yeah.
and it's still a loss.
It's
Even
still a
if you
loss.
moved it out of the general fund
Okay.
and to offset.
See, I haven't looked at them, just.
And
But
so
we
and
do
so
have that document that it will,
Yeah,
that will show you.
I seem to remember it being
Yeah.
almost minimal.
it's
And it could be, and they could be depressed, and that's
And
something we need
that's,
to
Well,
look
they
that's
are-
the issue. I
and-
think the values are depressed.
Yeah, and we need to look at that. I know we have investments out there, but we need to pay our fair share. And if they're too low, we need to increase that. We absolutely do.
So if you do look at the at that spreadsheet, you can see how we're running right now. We're looking at yes, being upside down in this at the end of this year, where we're tracking. Now, granted, again, it's one of these things that the more we spend, the more we kind of go upside down. But I think the challenge this year is going to be the fuel. The fuel's going up. You could argue we would maybe sell more because we're having to go up on the price as well. However, if the volume of sales goes down, plus we know we're going to go down when the runway's not in operation. So that alone is going. Now, granted, it's summer, so we know it's not the flight school portion of it, but it's definitely not going to have other revenues coming in. I don't know with the golf course. I'm assuming we're probably about to be too warm to play out there.
Now, they'll close in August, they're gonna be open in June and July.
Okay.
But, one thing on that is, they've got plans for 2 hotels out there, but they're light years away from getting anything like that built. There's no infrastructure out there. So there's gonna be, the people that come in to play are gonna have to be staying in town for at least 3 years, minimum. And, their business plan is to have the houses that people build put in a rental pool. There's not one house.
We need to make sure there's some endangered species out on all that property.
Yeah.
As long as possible.
It probably is, but anyway, so far,
Hogs.
there's not one house that's been started. So they're as far as people having to stay and eat, it's still gonna be in Nacogdoches for at least 3 years minimum.
Or they really better like them burgers in Mount Enterprise at that place on the corner there.
Yeah.
Well, they have a little restaurant that has burgers out there, but
Yeah,
it's
that's- I was gonna-
very limited, very
Yeah.
limited.
Well, your
People,
point's,
people that stay out there are not gonna be happy eating there every meal.
yeah. Well, your point's well taken. The airport needs to work to our advantage, and right now, it's a drag on the city and even the community, so we have to find a way to get it where
And
it's not
granted,
that.
there's certain areas, like let's take transit. I mean, transit's always gonna have a level of subsidy. It doesn't make money. This is a little different insofar as if we can add the right business mix there, we may get it pretty close to, or actually it'd be great if you get to the point it actually turns a profit.
Yeah.
And again, if you want to do it faster, who would be, again, I hate to run to them for everything from medical to discussions on housing to now aviation. But let's face it, if you look at College Station, who had to be partially in the driver's seat on all of those as well. It's a matter of throughput.
Yeah.
So that's just one example. Is that it on?
Yeah.
So, and on the housing gap analysis, you know, we've got, I do think the other thing would be good to look at. We have, you know, not just undeveloped parcels or platted properties that are significant, but we also have some that are curbed up, that have infrastructure, that have roads, that are undeveloped lots. And I'm not talking about ones that have fallen into disrepair and tax delinquency and those. I'm talking about, you know, ones off of Reggae. You've got some off of Appleby Sand in a few of the neighborhoods. And there hasn't been new construction, and very likely because the cost of construction right now is way up there. Now, those would typically be, you know, custom home builders or ones that would build custom-like one-by-ones. But even those, if we identify those in okay, let's just call it executive housing, which would be maybe your department heads at SFA or those that would work maybe at Elliott or at Eaton on the management side. And those would also be a benefit in terms of those folks otherwise are going to have to live in Lufkin or Tyler or Longview or out in the country. So if we can at least identify there's X number of built neighborhoods that have this many vacant lots proximate to utilities, ready to build, that's a good thing. How many properties would support multifamily in proximity to the university? And then we have this other thing that's, I think, definitely looming there we need to talk about, but we would dive deep into it. I would ask those that do the analysis is the age of some of our housing stock. I mean, we have whole neighborhoods that are kind of have not had a whole lot change other than their condition has not gotten better. And we have really old housing stock, and that piece there, it's not that you're trying to set it up for redevelopment, but there may be some of those neighborhoods that someone could come in and maybe there's a couple lots and maybe it'll spur redevelopment, meaning, or let's just say upgrades. And maybe there's something we can even look at in terms of, I know it'd be a slippery slope, but if it's coming down to encouraging folks to just a little bit of a delta to help them replace their roof or to paint their house or something like that. I would hate to only look at going through this, and maybe I'll set aside $100,000 and say, wait, you know what? If you're going to paint your house, if you're going to, remove all old, shrubs and trees that are dying, maybe there is something that we've talked about it even just in the general housing discussion and the infill. There may be some role that this body could also play that might clean up some of those streets, that might actually spur some other development and redevelopment of them in a positive way that's not a huge cost. Some of those might not fit in a normal category with some of the work that you're going to help me with it, the Mission NAC and some of those others do. It may not be that those folks fit that level of need, but it may be that it is such a heavy lift because of the age of their house, it would help. And I do think we try to look at improving the situation because we have old housing stock as best we can. Again, not a handout, but a hand up. We have limited resources to do this. Anything else to add? I mean, you know, the housing stock, when's the last time a full neighborhood's been built here? Let's be honest, in town.
Yeah.
I would think it would probably be the one you live in. That's how long it's been.
Rick, you may want to mention the city-owned properties that could be potentially transferred to the Type B now, tax exempt status.
So the tax exempt, or the tax delinquent, right?
Right. So just now that we are a 501(c), there's a statute that allows the city to transfer properties that it may have obtained either through tax foreclosure, seizure, or just to obtain, maybe somebody donated to the city. Now that that status has been achieved, the city can transfer these properties to the Type B corporation to potentially use those in an economic development manner
For that would,
housing,
yeah.
for those kind of things, as an incentive, and the city is able to transfer that without having to go out and obtain the fair market value and all those kind of steps that ordinarily an entity like the city would have to do.
and our last round on the delinquent tax lots, those all went for sale and were purchased at auction, correct? At the,
I'm not
Is
sure.
that-
I don't recall.
we'll get back to,
How many properties do you think we have? Jerry?
I'd have to get you that information. I don't know.
I would definitely do that. I think that's the first thing, is take an accounting of what properties you have, the city has, that could perhaps be moved into it.
a
and
land
what's the-
bank, yeah,
and-
be,
and-
yeah.
Yeah, and then what would be the economic benefit? What would it take to get those out for development?
Yep.
I think that's the first step we should do, and look at that, and then see, because some of them may need to have some money put into it, and maybe there's some way we can get money put into that to help start developing those. And, you know, we haven't discussed NEDCO, but NEDCO needs to play a role in some of this, because many businesses for the last 20, 30 years, 25 years have invested in NEDCO to help economic development, and they have resources that they could help with as well if the right opportunity is presented.
And,
So-
and I think we do need to, I mean, as we look at the housing analysis, yes, there are lots, and there's also lots where there were old homes, where there's no homes, or there's ones that are not livable. That would be ripe for redevelopment that are in town. And so some of those might be an easier lift,
Absolutely.
especially for a, workforce type housing scenario. And so I do think it's not going to be just one silver bullet that's going to be the fix here, but I do think we need to probably bring someone in to help us do that deep dive in, and we can work with them to develop some recommendations, obviously within the budget that we have or don't have.
Okay.
But also look at that land bank as part of that as
Oh,
well.
I think that's a place we need to really look at right now, as one area.
Yeah, if we can get a number, or like Robert said, an inventory of what we actually do have,
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember, we'll have to get back with Purdue Brandon on it, because we looked at it pretty hard last year, before the budget. You might not have been involved, but we'll get you back involved on that front.
So, just forgive my ignorance here. Is that something that we could, so we take those properties, put them in the 4B. The 4B would have more flexibility in dispensing those properties, right?
That's correct. So, as you know, with the city, we are very restricted on what we can do with transfer of property to anybody that's a private entity or private person. The Type B is not so constricted when it comes to economic development purposes, and that includes improving your housing stock and everything in the city. So you could incentivize, if you have those properties, and whether you maybe transfer those at a discount or have some kind of agreement with a developer whereby he develops that property, maybe you gift it to them if they develop it and create a new home there that
That hits the tax rolls, yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it impacts the city's going to benefit that eventually because it's going back on the tax
Right.
roll. And so that's essentially what's allowed for under the statute, because ultimately the economic development and benefit to the city is going to offset any value that it would have otherwise lost in the transfer of the property.
Well, and that's why I agree with you that we need to focus heavily on that, because that's something that's not gonna require a lot of funds on our end to start doing. And even if it requires us to clear whatever is on that land off, we'd still be in a better position to get it started and say, here you go develop it.
And especially if you can come up with, 4 or 6 lots that all are close to utilities. And maybe city council on the other side, we look at a way to, you can't waive your utility connections, but it could be that this body effectively pays that per the connection. But that probably would be, that it's been done. I've worked places where it's been done either through Housing Finance Corp, Property Finance Corp, or both. But the first step is, again, identifying the lots, transferring them, going through the process, figuring out what is market viable, and then going through an RFP or RFQ process to try to get someone, you try to set the parameters. Okay, we're trying to hit this price point. Maybe it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, or 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and with a maximum ceiling on it. And I've even seen also where down payment assistance might also come from a type B, and a limited amount, and you pre-qualify people. Because that can also then spur everybody cleaning up a whole street.
Yeah.
Even the other property owners might be on that same street.
I think the term that we need to look at is what you call delinquent period. We look at tax rolls. I look at them, and there's a lot of properties that haven't paid taxes in several years that are just out there. Well, no one's getting a benefit of that. The city's not, the county's not, the school district's not. That needs to be fixed. I'm not here today to say that we need to raise taxes on people. I'm saying that everybody should pay their fair share, and if someone is not paying their taxes, that needs to be corrected. Or if someone has a piece of property that they're paying less in tax just because they're able to, I won't say game the system and get around it, that needs to be corrected. I don't think a person should pay any more tax than they should pay, but everyone should pay their fair share, because what happens is the city doesn't have money to do their necessary things they need to do in the community. The school district doesn't have money to pay teachers and do the things they need, and the county is having issues. So people just need to pay their share. And if we have properties out there that are dormant, the city has, that people aren't building on, there's no taxable value, that needs to be corrected. We all recognize that, and we need to put a focus on it. So just like Chad said, we need to look at that, as well as the airport, as well as a few other things from an economic standpoint. What can we do to help this community? And we need to do that and be fair about how we do it, but we need to move forward with that. And there may be some money that can come into the type B, outside money, to help get it started. If you have property, but now it needs to be cleared and mowed or straightened up a few things, maybe there's some private money that can go in. And once we get that ball rolling, then things will then come together more
Robert,
clearly.
there's one, and I'm not gonna mention any names, delinquent property that the city is actively pursuing.
Well, you can go to the tax rolls and look. It's public information. We know where they are and who they are, and it just needs to be fair, is all I'm saying. People shouldn't pay more, but they shouldn't pay less, and
That's right.
they need to.
But they have to pay.
They need to pay their fair share.
right.
We all do,
Yeah.
and that's the key. It's like I said at the airport, if those properties are valued too low, based on what we know the fair market value should be, we should look at that and address it as a community and say, let's pay our fair share.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that.
Yep. I do think that's a whole different discussion on the tax equity issue. But when you do think about, you've got a significant number that are frozen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On the age, you have a low income component, then you have the student component.
Mm-hmm.
Well, pretty soon you have a finite number of people that are actually paying the bulk of the taxes. Oh, plus you have the ag piece, so ag exempt. So even inside of city limits, so you have a finite number of people that are bearing a big burden of the taxes, most of which are working age, many of which have kids, and and it's not just the city tax rate, but it's the total tax rate, including all the taxing entities. You can only push that so far.
You can.
Yep.
Okay. What else do you have?
That's all I have for the show tonight.
Okay, then. Any questions for Rick?
I guess I have one. You mentioned Nedco.
Mhm.
What kind of long-term relationship are we gonna have with Nedco? Does anybody, I'm just asking.
I think we don't know yet, as you know, and Mary Frances, you may have had some conversations, but we're going to have to find where that relationship is and what we're doing. We need to complement each other as we move forward and not obviously compete against, but also work together. But Nedco does. They have funds and there's participation, membership, and we're going to continue to do that. And the community's been very generous in that, private and the public as well. But we need to find out what role it plays and what this Type B plays. And you know, I'm always say, what are our sources of funds? How do we get those funds into the different entities? And then how do we use them appropriately to get the most benefit out of it? And we have to work together on that.
Just a reminder, one of our permanent members on the board, per the bylaws, is a Nedco member. So.
Yeah.
I
That's
think
Scott right now.
permanent funding for this organization is gonna be critical in the next year, 2 years, whatever.
I'd say at least the next 2 legislative sessions, at least probably 4 years, 3 to 4 years.
One other question, you know, you're always looking to expand your tax base, but am I right in this, that you can't expand the city limits anymore without, it takes somebody in the
We're-
city limits without their permission? Is
No,
that-
no, we're like a vampire. You have to invite us in. So, we can through development agreements if we do have some ETJ. So if there is, let's say, a business prospect, they want to connect to our utility system, we typically would do a development agreement and they would invite us to annex them as part of that agreement. So we do have a mechanism, but no, this isn't the 70s and you can't just take more. Doesn't work that way. I will say this though, and we may want to dive deeper in some of the taxation issues, but again, that business personal property piece alone is probably, our look at it is to maintain the same level of service and everything we're doing right now. We effectively have to have another tax increase to replace it. That's the irony of what the legislature has passed in some of these areas is, we think local government's too tough on taxes, so we'll take away this and we'll take away that. So what do they end up having to do? Raise taxes.
Yeah.
So, and it probably, again, when you're talking about business personal property, you're probably raising taxes, unfortunately, on those same people I just described.
The homeowners.
The homeowners, not the ones that actually had some business means or are frozen and have assets, but not, their taxes are going to stay the same. So that's one of the discussions that y'all will get even deeper in, those of y'all that are on council, before we go into the legislative session. Because you can only cut so much until there's just bone.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of smoke and mirrors,
So
is all that is.
Do you have a quick number on the amount of revenue? You said it was 50 million in valuation.
It was, I think the quick look at it on the property tax side, I think it was about 2 pennies. I think it was, I want to say, I know what Todd looked at. I think we'd have to go to somewhere close to 60 cents or 59 something, effectively to replace that loss of
So
revenue.
it's $500,000 or so,
Yeah.
give or take.
Which, I mean, it all $500,000 here, $500,000 there, it becomes real
That's it.
money pretty quick
Yeah.
when you're trying to hire police and fire and build
CIP,
things,
yeah.
CIP and everything
Well,
else.
you would hope that we've put more on the tax roll also.
Well, and see, that's the irony, is it actually, I think we had 30, I want to say it was a lower amount than I thought it would have been. It was added to the tax roll was 35 or 40 million, but then you had a 50 million
Yeah.
decrease. So it offset that increase.
And then you have the inflation piece.
Then you have inflation, which we don't know where that's going to end right now, because of geopolitical things that we can't control. God knows, I couldn't control that.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm out.
All right, you're out of questions.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you for, I guess, informing us of where we're going and what's happening right now. And thank you, Jerry, for getting that information together in your reporting. It looks like with there's nothing else to be presented at this time. We're adjourned then. Thank you. And the time is 6:10 p.m.